The Legend of 8 Seconds, Bruce Lee vs. The Viking. Miami Beach, Florida, summer of 1972. The midday sun strikes the white sand like a hammer of fire. The beach is packed with tourists, surfers, and families with brightly colored umbrellas. The air smells of suntan lotion, sea salt, and burgers on nearby grills. It's classic early 70s Miami Beach. Disco music blaring from portable radios and neon-colored swimwear. The American paradise at its peak. But in one section of the beach, something unusual is happening. A crowd of nearly 200 people forms a tight circle around a makeshift wooden platform. On that platform are gigantic weights, rusty chains, and a man who looks like he stepped out of a monster movie, Magnus the Viking Johansson, a Northern European strongman champion, 150 kilograms, 330 pounds, of muscle, functional fat, and Nordic ego. Magnus is in Miami as part of a promotional tour for strongman competitions that were beginning to gain popularity in the United States. And in front of him, barefoot on the hot sand, wearing black pants rolled up to his knees and no shirt, showing off a physique defined like a bronze sculpture, is Bruce Lee. At 63 kilograms, 139 pounds, a third of Magnus' weight, he is surrounded by tourists who have no idea they are about to witness 8 seconds that will defy everything they believe about strength, size, and human physics. The confrontation. What happened that day in Miami Beach became an urban legend told in gyms, beaches, and strongman competitions for decades. Some say it's impossible, others swear they were there, but the truth is more incredible than any myth. In 1972, Bruce Lee was at a crucial point in his career. He had just finished filming Fist of Fury and The Chinese Connection in Hong Kong. Both had exploded at the Asian box office. Hollywood was finally taking him seriously. Warner Brothers had agreed to produce Enter the Dragon, his first major project with an American budget, but Bruce still faced the same old problem. The systemic racism of an industry that believed an Asian man couldn't sell tickets in the US. Bruce had flown to Miami to meet with producers and potential investors. While out for a morning training session around 10 a.m., curiosity led him toward a crowd. Magnus the Viking Johansson was putting on a show. He stood 2 meters tall, 6 feet 7 inches, and weighed 150 kilograms of pure mass. He was performing feats of strength, lifting 2 grown men on a bar over his shoulders and breaking coconuts with his bare hands. Magnus loved the attention. He flexed his massive biceps and roared like an animal. Then he made a move that would change his day. He shouted to the crowd, "If anyone here thinks they can move me even 1 centimeter, come up. I'll give $100 to whoever succeeds." But no one can, because size and strength are the only things that matter in real combat. He pointed directly at Bruce. "You, the little Asian man, what are you doing here? This is a demonstration for strong men." The challenge. Bruce didn't show anger. He climbed onto the platform with the calm movements of a cat. Magnus laughed. "Seriously, you weigh less than my weights. You're an insect. I'll crush you like an insect if you touch me." Bruce spoke clearly and calmly. "Magnus, I didn't come to lift weights with you. I came to show you that you don't understand physics. You said no one can move you. I say I can put you on your knees in the sand in less than 8 seconds without using brute force, and I won't even break a sweat." The crowd erupted. Magnus' face turned red with rage. 8 seconds. You against me? I am a strongman champion. I have lifted 400 kilograms. You are nothing. The deal was set. An elderly tourist with a straw hat offered to count aloud. The 8-second breakdown. Magnus planted himself in the center of the platform. Legs apart, arms crossed, arrogant. 8. Magnus expected a push or a strike. Instead, Bruce began to circle him slowly, analyzing. He identified Magnus' weaknesses: overstressed knees and terrible lateral balance. 7. Bruce continued to circle. Magnus grew frustrated. Fight like a man. 6. Bruce exploded. He didn't strike Magnus' body. He swept his leg in a perfect arc, hitting directly behind Magnus' left knee. The joint buckled. 5. As Magnus shifted his weight to compensate, Bruce executed an identical sweep behind the right knee. Magnus began to tilt forward. 4. Magnus was in an impossible position. He reached out to grab Bruce, but Bruce was already behind him, out of reach. 3. Bruce applied a controlled push to the small of Magnus' back. Not brute force but redirection. Magnus' knees hit the sand with the sound of 2 falling bags of cement. 2. Magnus tried to push himself up, but Bruce placed a foot lightly on Magnus' thigh, using just enough pressure to disrupt his leverage. 1. Bruce stepped back, breathing normally. No sweat. Magnus remained on his knees, staring at his hands in total shock. The crowd went from stunned silence to an explosion of cheers. Magnus Johansson stayed on his knees for nearly 30 seconds. Not because he was hurt, but because his mind was trying to process the impossible. He was the Viking, and he had been humbled by physics and a man a third of his size. He had lifted stones that weighed more than small cars. He had won tug-of-war competitions against 5-man teams. He had been interviewed in newspapers describing his ancestral Nordic power, yet a 138-pound, 63 kilograms, Asian man had just brought him to his knees in the sand without even breathing hard. Bruce walked forward and offered his hand to Magnus. Magnus looked at it as if it were a snake, then slowly accepted it. Bruce helped pull, but Magnus had to do most of the work to get himself up. His 330 pounds, 150 kilograms, were too much for Bruce to lift directly. Once standing, Magnus looked at Bruce with a mixture of forced respect and a wounded ego. The crowd continued to shout. Some yelled again, as if it were a circus show. Bruce spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. Magnus, you are incredibly strong. You can lift things I never could, but strength is not power. Power is how you apply physics at the right moment. I didn't use my muscles to beat you. I used your knees, the sand, gravity, and your own weight against you. You are strong, but you are not invincible. No one is. Magnus, his face still red and his pride shattered, but his mind beginning to comprehend, nodded slowly. Then he asked in a low voice, "How did you know about my knees?" Bruce smiled. Because all strongmen have the same problem. They build strength upward by lifting, but they never train lateral stability or knee mobility under load. Your knees are your weak point because they carry 330 pounds every day without rest. And in the sand without a solid base, there is no way for you to compensate. It's not your fault. It's your training. Magnus remained silent for a moment, then did something that surprised everyone. He took off the leather collar with a Viking symbol that he wore around his neck, held it in his massive hand, and offered it to Bruce. In Viking culture, when a warrior is honestly defeated, he gives something valuable to the victor. I have no gold here, but this belongs to my family. Please. Bruce looked at the collar, then at Magnus. For a moment it seemed Bruce might refuse it, but then he nodded and accepted the collar with respect, placing it around his neck. The crowd cheered louder. Magnus raised his hand for silence. Gradually the crowd fell quiet. Then Magnus, with his deep voice and Nordic accent, said, "I came to Miami to show strength, but today I learned that strength is not everything. This man, Bruce Lee, taught me humility, and that is worth more than any competition." The beach exploded in applause. Some were even crying. A group of young men rushed toward Bruce asking for autographs. Magnus stepped down from the platform, still processing everything, and disappeared into the crowd toward the ocean, likely to soak his wounded ego in cold water. The science of the fight. What happened after those 8 seconds in Miami Beach is just as important as the 8 seconds themselves. Bruce spent the next 2 hours on the beach surrounded by tourists, local athletes, and even some strongman competitors. Everyone wanted to know how. How is it possible for someone so small to defeat someone so large? Bruce, always the teacher, used the opportunity to instruct. He explained concepts of physics most had never considered: center of gravity, fulcrums, and how the human body is a series of interconnected levers. He explained that in real combat, it doesn't matter how much the opponent weighs if you understand where your balance point is. A young local bodybuilder, impressed but skeptical, asked, "But Bruce, what if Magnus had grabbed you? If he had lifted you, his strength is real." Bruce nodded. "Absolutely. If Magnus grabs me cleanly, his strength is a massive advantage. That's why I never gave him the chance. Intelligent combat is about controlling distance, timing, and never letting your opponent use their advantage. Magnus is dangerous in a close grip, so I moved where his grip couldn't reach me. You don't fight your opponent's strengths. You attack their weaknesses." The transformation of Magnus. Magnus Johansson did not disappear after that day. In fact, something remarkable happened. 3 days later, Magnus appeared at Bruce's hotel. He was wearing normal clothes, not his Viking show outfit. His beard was trimmed. He looked humble. He asked Bruce if he could train with him. Bruce, surprised and pleased, accepted. For the next 5 days, while Bruce was still in Miami, Magnus trained with him on the beach every morning. Bruce taught him knee mobility, balance exercises on unstable surfaces, and how to protect joints while maintaining functional strength. Magnus, in turn, showed Bruce lifting techniques that Bruce incorporated into his own strength training. It was a genuine exchange of knowledge, and by the end they became something like friends. Years later, in 1978, Magnus gave an interview to a strongman magazine in Norway. The journalist asked about his most humiliating defeat. Magnus replied, "It wasn't humiliating, it was educational. Bruce Lee taught me that I had only trained half of my body. I trained for strength, but I ignored balance, mobility, and tactical understanding. After that day, I changed my training completely. I became a better competitor and a better man." Shattering stereotypes. There is another layer to this story, the racial element. When Magnus called Bruce the little Asian and said, "I don't know what you are," it wasn't just strongman arrogance, it was the casual racism of the early 70s. Magnus, like many white Europeans of that era, genuinely believed that Asians were physically inferior. It was part of the cultural narrative. Whites and blacks were strong, while Asians were weak but cunning. Bruce faced this constantly in Hollywood, in gyms, and on the street. People assumed that because he was Asian and slender, he couldn't be dangerous. But every time Bruce demonstrated his skill, every time he brought a giant to his knees, he wasn't just winning a fight, he was smashing racial stereotypes. After those 8 seconds, no one on that beach ever looked at an Asian man and assumed weakness again.